President, I rise to urge my colleagues to overturn the Biden administration's sweeping restrictions of what we call in Alaska the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, so to pass the CRA, Senate Joint Resolution 80 that we're going to vote on here in a couple of minutes. And when I say the Biden administration's restrictions, in this case, that is not strong enough. What the Biden administration did when they came into office is they took the NPRA, that's right there, the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, and they said, we're going to essentially shut this down. So what is the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska? Well, Mr. President, it started out 1923, President Warren Harding said that this is so important, this area of Alaska, we're going to call it the Naval Petroleum Reserve of Alaska for the U.S. Navy for oil. Okay, then Congress later came in law said, no, we're going to designate this the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska. It's the size of Indiana, and we're going to make sure it's developed for oil development. That's what this body did. So Joe Biden comes in and says, nope, we're going to take an executive order and we're going to shut it down. And that's what they did. So, Mr. President, the most important element of this is not just Biden flaunting the law, which he did in Alaska many times. As I'm going to get to, he canceled the voices of the most important people in Alaska who live there. So let me go to the next slide here. A lot of people have seen this. This is what I call the last frontier lockup. Okay, this is a map of Alaska. Here's NPRA up here. Okay, again, we're a big state. That's about the size of Indiana. Biden issued 70 executive orders and executive actions singularly focused on my state during his 4 years. 7-0. One of them is the lockup of NPRA on this huge list. By the way, I went to the President Biden, when this list was at 48, and I handed it to him. I said, Mr. President, what are you doing? Do you even know what you're doing? John Podesta was in there, all the bad, far left radical enviros. You're crushing our state. You're crushing American energy. You're killing workers. And you're not listening to the native people of my state who don't like this. And by the way, Mr. President, we have the highest standards in the world on resource development in Alaska. But they didn't listen. 7-0 executive orders singularly focused on one state. It was an outrage. But it showed their priorities, which was not to unleash American energy, but to listen to the radical far left who always want to shut down Alaska. Don't care about the native people, don't care about jobs, certainly don't care about union jobs. So, Mr. President, the good news is when President Trump came into office, he said enough of that, we are going to unleash Alaska. So day one, this is a day one executive order from the President of the United States. He said, we're going to unleash Alaska's extraordinary resource potential. That's a day one executive order from President Trump. And so that's what we're doing. And we're going to do it through the executive branch, like the President's doing, and here in the legislative branch. So not surprisingly, Mr. President, this morning there was a statement of administrative policy from the Trump administration saying they, quote, strongly support passage of S.J.Res 80 of my CRA. So I'd like to submit this for the record.
Objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, of course, why do we want to do this? Again, we have the highest environmental standards in the world, but when you unleash Alaska energy, when you unleash Montana energy, when you unleash American energy, it helps with jobs. It helps with our environment because we have the highest standards in the world. And it really helps, Mr. President, with national security. I remember a meeting I was in many years ago with Senator McCain, John McCain, and a very prominent Russian dissident, Vladimir Kara-Murza. Putin has tried to poison and kill this guy twice. He's still alive. He lives in America now. He's a great hero. And at the end of the meeting, I looked at Vladimir Kara-Murza. what more can we do to undermine the Putin regime? And you know what he said? He says, simple, Senator. The number one thing America can do to undermine Vladimir Putin is produce more American energy. So by the way, all my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who love shutting down energy production, you're only helping our adversaries, Venezuela, China, Russia. So this is about national security, environmental stewardship, and really important, Mr. President, I want to talk about another group that matters a lot with regard to this CRA. And this is the Native people who live on the North Slope of Alaska. This is a slide that I put out a lot. So this is where we're looking at. This is the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska in my state. This is what we call our trilateral in Alaska. The Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope, that's the tribe. The North Slope Borough, which is our government entity, which is huge. North Slope Borough, I think, is almost the size of Montana. And the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, which is our regional native corporation. They tried, Mr. President, 8 times they flew to Washington, D.C. This is all native people. They flew to Washington, D.C. during the Biden administration. 8 times they flew down here, 4,000 miles away from their home, to try to meet with the Secretary of Interior, Secretary Holland, in the White House of the Biden administration saying, don't do this NPRA lockup. This is our land. Don't do it. And you know what, Mr. President? The Biden administration never even met with them. Secretary of Interior never met with them. They flew here 8 different times to say, don't do it. This is every tribal leader, native leader on the North Slope, and their voices were ignored. Think about that. 8 times. Now, the total insult when Biden finally did this giant regulation locking up the entire National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, you know what he did? He and Secretary Holland put out a statement saying, we did this because the native people of Alaska wanted it. I went on national TV. I don't normally throw bombs, but I went on national TV. I said, that is a bald-faced lie from Joe Biden. Bald-faced lie. He was canceling native voices, and then he was using them. He literally said, we did this because the native people of Alaska wanted it. Outrageous. Actually, one of the most outrageous things I saw the Biden administration do, and they did a heck of a lot of outrageous stuff. So, Mr. President, I want to submit for the record a letter from ICAS, the North Slope Borough, and ASRC. The trilateral, as we call it, all the native leadership on the North Slope strongly supporting my CRA. I'd like to submit this for the record.
Without objection.
And I'd also like to submit for the record, a letter from the Alliance, which is all of our companies, not just energy companies, but all related companies, the biggest group of businesses, workers in Alaska, who also strongly support my CRA. I'd like to submit that for the record, Mr. President.
Without objection.
Let me just end with this. I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle can vote for this CRA. But, Mr. President, I talk about jobs, I talk about national security, I talk about working families, all of which are very important. At the end of the day, this is so important because this actually, in my state, is a matter of life and death. What do I mean, Mr. President? Now, I've trotted out this chart a lot. I'm going to explain it here. But this is why I get so riled up about these issues and why when my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and Democratic administrations always come up to Alaska saying, hey, we're going to just shut you down, right? We're going to crush your jobs. Why I get so animated about it. It's jobs, it's national security. When you're producing energy from America, from Alaska, you're strengthening the country, strengthening good jobs, good union jobs, by the way. But the other thing you're doing is you're helping people live longer. Helping people live longer. What do I mean? Mr. President, I break this chart out a lot because it's really important to me. This is from the American Medical Association from 1980 to 2014 on Americans' life expectancy. Who was living longer? Who, unfortunately, was living less longer? If you look here, this is America. The light blue, the darker blue, purple, that's the states that are living the longest. Yellow, orange, red, that's actually people losing life expectancy. That's not good at all. The place that had the longest life expectancy increase from 1980 to 2014 was my state. 13 years. Look at this. 13 years. On the North Slope, Northwest Arctic Borough, Aleutian Island chain. So how did that happen? Why did that happen? Mr. President, it happened because responsible resource development happened. The native people of my state were living 13 years longer, more than any other place in the country. And I've asked my colleagues a lot when we debate this, give me a policy indicator of success, more important than the people you are representing are living longer. There isn't one. I've never heard of one. People I'm representing are living longer because we're responsibly developing resources, and they get jobs, and they get gymnasiums, and they get hospitals, and they get flush toilets and running water, which a lot of the communities in my state, native communities, don't have. So this is a matter of life and death for my colleagues, and I do want to really try to encourage my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, join us. This is the right call. There's a lot of talk about, hey, we want to help minority communities, we want to help people of color. Here's your chance. You're going to help them live longer. So, Mr. President, I'm hoping that every member of this body can come down and vote for my CRA because it's the right thing to do. It's going to help with jobs, it's going to help with national security, and it's what the native people in my state who actually live there want. Again, they came down here 8 different times and told President Biden and Secretary Haaland, don't do this. Don't do this. Not only did they ignore their voices, they wouldn't even meet with them. So now we have a chance to right that wrong, pass my CRA, and again, I really hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will do this because it is the right thing to do. And the indigenous people of my state who live here want this because it's going to help them live longer. I don't think there's anything more important than that.